Let's talk about pressure. Pressure does something strange when it comes to power. It just doesn't trip leaders, in fact, it rewires them. And here's the thing, history has shown us time and time again when the clock is ticking and the stakes are high, leaders think very differently in the way that they normally do. Because the entire world comes sinking down at them, the options become infinitesimally narrow, and instead of logic and reasoning, they depend much more on instinct. Pressure, the human brain abandons slow logic and goes towards quick decision making skills, which includes faster decisions, familiar beliefs, old habits. In normal situations, these could potentially save lives, but in complex political scenarios, they rather take lives instead of saving them. And that lies the difference between leaders, and that's where history splits. Some leaders rise up to the challenge while others fail to it, and it has little to do with intelligence, if nothing at all. Moments of extreme crisis, if you will. Information is often incomplete, time is your enemy over here, and more often than not, every choice risks a disaster. And at times like this, leaders decide to make decisions on who they already are rather than learning on current evidence and decision making skills that they could be potentially making through this section. And that is where failure steps in, because stress induces bias. Leaders start searching for evidence that confirms their own bias as to prove their point. Warnings feels like disloyalty. Any other countering argument feels like an attack on the idea itself. And instead of correcting course, they double down on the decisions that they've made. And that is one of the biggest inducing factors of how pressure makes politicians and makes leaders conduct bad decisions in the political field. We've seen this pattern repeat almost every other time in human history. Executives dismiss engineers, politicians misread signals, entire governments respond perfectly to the wrong problem. Sometimes pressure just causes so much bias to the person that it distorts judgment completely, and it also breaks the person both politically in their career as well as mentally. There are some historic examples of this particular pressure breaking people. Some famous one, in fact, in 1941, when Nazi forces invaded the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin reportedly froze. Can you imagine the man who controlled millions of people across the USSR could barely move? Similarly, in 1956, British Prime Minister Anthony Eden pushed himself through the Suez Canal crisis until his mind and mental frame completely broke and he had to resign. These weren't weak men, they were just overwhelmed systems. But history also shows us a different pattern. Some leaders build up or their own tactics to beat out this particular psychological battle, and a couple of them that I have written down over here to refer is Cuban Missile Crisis. John F. Kennedy refused to hear only one single answer. If he had, the Cold War would have escalated into a nuclear war itself. Because he demanded disagreement, he slowed down the decision making so much so that one particular decision just couldn't be taken regarding it. More opinions were heard and more different tactics were heard before Kennedy reacted to the situation itself. Franklin Roosevelt, another American president, spoke to a frightened nation but didn't promise them victory but comforted them. Fear is better when it's directed straight on rather than beating about the bush. Another great prime minister, Winston Churchill, projected confidence during World War II. Instead of rejecting bad news, he kept changing strategy while absorbing it continuously, which ultimately ended him and the Allies winning World War II. So there are tactics. Leaders just do not eliminate stress. They adopt it and use it to their own benefit. Research calls this real crisis leadership, and I've written down 5 points of what real crisis leadership actually means. So, number one, sense what is happening. Number two, decide without illusion. Number three, explain meaning to others. Number four, end the crisis deliberately. And number five, actually learn afterwards. Can you tell me a step which leaders most often fail? It would be number five. You would have guessed it correctly. Most leaders fail at this last step because personality still matters. Leaders are driven by dominance and the fear of losing of status and their public image and the political careers that they'd rather risk war than losing their public status and the public image itself. Because especially when they're cornered, you can add reputational fear, future investigations, public blame, and decision making becomes defensive rather than becoming strategic, which is a decision which becomes an issue a lot of politicians face even to this day. Contrary to popular opinion, history is just not shaped by political ideology or intelligence. It's shaped by a couple of other factors like, let's see, stress, sleep, ego, advisors, and emotional control. Because when pressure rises, leaders don't become better versions of themselves as is officially claimed. They just become more of what they already are. And that's why the future of politics doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to people who can think clearly while everything is going on. And that is it. That's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel, and I look forward to seeing you soon with the next video. Bye bye.